I think the thing I remember most about Clint Eastwood is that a year or so later.
For 3 decades, Robert Urich was one of the most familiar faces on American television. He was a guy you invited into your living room every week without a second thought. The square-jawed, easy-smiling leading man who made playing a private detective, a SWAT officer, or a ship's captain look effortless. Millions of viewers grew up watching him solve crimes in the neon glow of Las Vegas or walk the gritty streets of Boston as a wisecracking gumshoe. But the version of Robert Urich that audiences saw on screen, confident, invincible, always one step ahead of trouble, was nothing like the man fighting for his life behind the cameras. And the woman standing beside him through all of it, actress Heather Menzies, was carrying her own quiet battle that the public wouldn't fully understand until years after his passing. This is the story of two people who built a life together in the spotlight, weathered devastating illness side by side, and ultimately left behind a legacy that reached far beyond Hollywood. Robert Urich was born on December 19, 1946, in the small town of Toronto, Ohio, a steel mill community along the Ohio River. He was raised in a working-class household of Rusin and Slovak heritage and grew up in the Byzantine Catholic tradition. From an early age, Urich stood out as an athlete and a natural leader, the kind of kid teachers and coaches assume would go on to do something notable. That promise earned him a football scholarship to Florida State University, where he played on the offensive line and, without knowing at the time, crossed paths with another young man who would shape the entire trajectory of his life, a fellow student-athlete named Burt Reynolds. Urich wasn't chasing a career in entertainment when he graduated from Florida State. He earned a degree in radio and television communications, then went on to complete a master's degree in broadcast research and management at Michigan State University. He was methodical, ambitious, and practical, the sort of person who builds a career step by step. He even studied voice at the University of Chicago before landing a job at WGN in sales, and later gave local weather reporting a try. None of it stuck. Underneath the buttoned-up broadcasting career was a growing pull toward performing, one that eventually got him fired from a sales job when his employer discovered he was moonlighting in local theater. Rather than see it as a setback, Urich took it as a sign. The break that changed everything came when Urich reunited with Burt Reynolds, who had by then become one of the biggest names in Hollywood. The two appeared together in the Chicago stage production of The Rainmaker, and Reynolds saw something in his old college friend worth betting on. He encouraged Urich to pack up and try his luck in Los Angeles. Urich took the leap, and within a short time he was landing small television roles, including a guest spot on the FBI in 1972. A year later came his first starring role in the short-lived series Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and that same year he made his feature film debut opposite Clint Eastwood in Magnum Force, playing a young motorcycle cop with a vigilante streak. It wasn't a lead role, but it proved Urich could hold his own on the big screen next to one of the era's biggest stars. Reynolds continued to open doors for his friend. He introduced Urich to producer Aaron Spelling, who cast him in the action series SWT in 1975. The show became an instant sensation, though its graphic content also drew heavy criticism, and it was canceled after just one season. Urich barely slowed down. He picked up a memorable supporting role on the sitcom Soap and starred in the short-lived Bewitched spin-off Tabitha, before landing the role that would truly define his early career, Dan Tana, the stylish Las Vegas private investigator at the center of Vega. To physically transforming Tafpar, Urich packing 40-pound soft missile. Deshawasahit, earning him 12 Golden Globe nominations, and turning him into nothing Mr. Cognizable leading men on network television, when Vega. To physically transform into the part, Urich packed on 40-pound of muscle. The show was a hit, earning him 2 Golden Globe nominations and turning him into one of the most recognizable leading men on network television. When Vega, to physically transforming Tafpar, Urich packing 40-pound soft missile. Deshawasahit, earning him 12 Golden Globe nominations and turning him into nothing Mr. Cognizable leading men on network television. When Vega was canceled in 1981 after ratings began to slip, Urich signed with MGM and pivoted toward film, starring in the science fiction thriller Endangered Species, before returning to television in the short-lived Gavilan. The mid-1980s brought a string of film roles that ranged from the offbeat comedy The Ice Pirates to Wes Craven's horror film Invitation to Hell and the drama Turk 182, opposite a young Timothy Hutton. None of them became box office blockbusters, but Urich's next television role would cement his place in pop culture for good. In 1985, he was cast as a title character in Spenser, for hire, playing a tough, principled Boston private investigator based on Robert B. Parker's novels. The series ran for 3 seasons and became one of the defining roles of his career, one he returned to in several television movies well into the 1990s. During this same stretch, Urich also stepped behind the camera in a different sense, hosting National Geographic Explorer, starting in 1988, a role that showcased a more thoughtful, curious side of him and earned him a Cable AC award. In 1989, Urich took on one of the most critically respected roles of his career, playing former Texas Ranger Jake Spoon in the acclaimed miniseries Lonesome Dove. Critics praised the emotional depth he brought to a character with a tragic arc, and the project remains one of the most celebrated westerns ever produced for television. Through the early 1990s, Urich kept working steadily, even as many of his projects struggled to find an audience. The sitcom American Dreamer, the drama series Crossroads, and the short-lived Parent with Faye Dunaway and It Had to Be You among them. He also lent his voice to a nature documentary that would earn him an Emmy for narration, a fitting honor for a man who had always taken as much pride in the quieter, educational side of his work as he did in his leading man roles. Then, in 1996, Urich found himself with what looked like a genuine late career hit, the Western drama The Lazarus Man. Audiences responded well, and the show was renewed for a second season. But just as that news arrived, Urich shared devastating information with the world. He had been diagnosed with synovial sarcoma, a rare and aggressive cancer that attacks the body's soft tissue and joints. Rather than standing by their star, the show's production company chose to cancel The Lazarus Man outright. Urich was furious that no one had even asked whether he was still capable of working, and he later pursued legal action over the decision, which was eventually settled privately. It was a bitter coda to what should have been a triumphant comeback. What followed was a period that revealed exactly who Robert Urich was as a person. He did not disappear from public life to quietly endure treatment. He underwent surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, and in the middle of it all, he kept working, hosting the medical documentary series Vital Signs and the PBS program Boatworks. He became a visible advocate for cancer research and early detection, using his platform to encourage others facing similar diagnoses. Along with his wife, he helped establish a cancer research fund at the University of Michigan Comprehensive Cancer Center, and after winning $125,000 on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he donated the entire sum to the cause. His advocacy earned him recognition from the John Wayne Cancer Institute and the Gilda Radner Courage Award. By 1998, doctors declared him cancer-free, and in a moment that felt like vindication, he was named the national spokesperson for the American Cancer Society. Urich treated his remission as an opportunity rather than a reprieve to be cautious with. He returned to series television as a captain in Love Boat, The Next Wave, made his Broadway debut playing the fast-talking lawyer Billy Flynn in Chicago, and later joined the cast of the sitcom Emerald. But cancer was never entirely gone. In November 2001, Urich revealed that doctors had discovered new lumps, though a new course of medication seemed to be working, and he remained optimistic in interviews. That optimism could not hold back what came next. In April of 2002, Urich was admitted to Los Robles Hospital and Medical Center in Thousand Oaks, California, with breathing complications. On April 16, 2002, surrounded by his wife and children, Robert Urich died at the age of 55. His funeral mass was held days later in North Hollywood, and he was later cremated, with his ashes interred near a family property in Ontario, Canada. Behind every chapter of Urich's public battle with cancer was his wife, actress Heather Menzies. Before Heather, Urich had been married once already, to actress Barbara Rucker. That marriage ended in divorce in the mid-1970s. Not long after, Urich met Menzies while the two were filming a commercial in which they played a couple getting married. Life, as it turned out, imitated the script. The two fell for each other for real, married in the mid-1970s, and remained together until Urich's death in 2002. Heather Menzies was born in Toronto, Canada, in December of 1949, to Scottish immigrant parents. Her childhood was anything but settled. By the time she was a young teenager, her family had already lived in several cities across North America and overseas, following her father's work as an artist. Menzies began acting as a child and, remarkably, landed one of the most beloved roles in film history before she had even finished growing up. Louisa Von Trapp in The Sound of Music, released in 1965. She had no formal training when she took on the part, yet she held her own alongside a cast that would become cinema legends, singing alongside her on-screen siblings in scenes that are still cherished by audiences 6 decades later. Menzies went on to build a long, varied career of her own, appearing across a wide range of television series throughout the 1970s and 1980s, and even sharing the screen with her husband on an episode of Vega Dollar. She became a cult favorite for her role as Jessica Six in the science fiction series Logan's Run, and she took on film roles that ranged far from her wholesome Sound of Music beginnings. Menzies was, by every account, her own woman with her own career, not simply defined by being married to a television star. When Urich's cancer battle began in 1996, Menzies became his closest source of strength, standing beside him through every treatment and every setback, all while continuing to raise their 3 children and manage the pressures that come with a very public illness. What most people did not know at the time was that Menzies had her own history with cancer. She was a survivor of ovarian cancer, a fight she had already been through before her husband's diagnosis. That experience gave her a particular kind of resilience, and after Urich's death, she poured herself into keeping his legacy alive, continuing the sarcoma research fund the couple had built together and dedicating much of the rest of her life to cancer advocacy. The cruelest twist in the story came 15 years after Robert's death. In November of 2017, Heather Menzies was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. There was no long fight this time, no remission to hold on to. Just weeks after her diagnosis, on December 24th, 2017, Menzies passed away at the age of 68, surrounded by her family. Her son later described her simply as an actress and a ballerina who had loved living life to the fullest. It was an ending that closed the loop on a marriage that had already survived one devastating cancer battle, only for the disease to eventually claim them both. Robert and Heather's path to parenthood had not been an easy one either. After enduring multiple miscarriages, the couple turned to adoption, welcoming their first 2 children, Ryan and Emily, in the late 1970s, and a third daughter, Allison, roughly 2 decades later. By all accounts, Urich was an unusually present and emotionally engaged father for a man with his level of fame, someone who chose connection over discipline and made a point of getting down to his children's level rather than lecturing from above. His son, Ryan, has spoken publicly, more than his siblings, about what it was like watching his father endure years of illness. Ryan has described the helplessness of driving his father to chemotherapy appointments during his senior year of high school, carefully avoiding every pothole to spare him pain. That experience reshaped Ryan's entire future. Instead of following his parents into acting, though he tried it briefly, he went into medicine and became an infectious disease specialist, a path he is directly credited to watching his father fight cancer and wishing he could have done more to help. His sister Emily found a similar calling, going on to work as an emergency room nurse. Their youngest sister, Allison, along with her siblings, has largely kept a private life outside the entertainment industry, but the family has remained connected through their continued involvement with the foundation built in their parents' names. The legacy Robert and Heather Urich left behind extended well past their own children. Their hometown communities remember them in lasting ways. Toronto, Ohio, named a highway interchange after Robert, and the couple's fundraising work for a performing arts center at a Utah high school led to a scholarship established in his name after his death. Robert earned a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and for years he held the distinction of being the only person with a surname beginning with the letter U honored there. Most significantly, the sarcoma research fund the couple founded at the University of Michigan continued long after both of their deaths, a living tribute to 2 people who turned personal tragedy into something that could help others. It's worth noting how different Robert Urich's personal story was from that of the friend who helped launch his career. Burt Reynolds, the man who convinced Urich to try Hollywood in the first place, lived a far more turbulent life off screen. particularly when it came to relationships. His marriage to actress Lonnie Anderson, which began amid enormous Hollywood fanfare in the late 1980s, collapsed into one of the messiest and most publicized divorces of the decade, with both sides trading accusations that played out in tabloids for years. The fallout, combined with a string of financial setbacks, eventually pushed Reynolds into bankruptcy in the mid-1990s. He would go on to face further legal battles in his personal life in the years that followed. Reynolds remained a beloved and enormously influential screen presence throughout his career, but his private life often generated as many headlines as his films did. Urich's story stands in sharp contrast. A marriage that endured real hardship, illness, and grief, built on partnership rather than public spectacle. What makes the story of Robert Urich and Heather Menzies so affecting isn't just a tragedy of losing both of them to cancer 15 years apart. It's the fact that neither of them let illness define how they lived. Urich kept working, kept advocating, kept showing up for his family through every round of treatment, right up until his final months, when he still found the energy to play with his youngest daughter just days before her 4th birthday. Menzies, already a cancer survivor herself, carried that same resilience through her husband's illness and then through her own, and spent years